The following is a production of Texas Lutheran University. For more information, please visit tlu.edu.
I want to go, before I introduce our speaker, just go over a few logistical things and say a couple of thank yous. Our schedule for the day will be here in this room until 10:30. Our first session is here until 10:30, and then after that we'll take a 15-minute break and head over to the Fritz House, which if you go out the side of this building and just keep walking straight, you'll run into it. It's really nice, called the Fritz Homestead, just past the Beck Center. So we'll head over there. We're kind of doing the youth ministry thing, being flexible with our resources and our spaces. So we'll head over there right after this session. There is a Starbucks in Shapey Hall, which is just across the way. We won't have coffee and snacks in between sessions. Lunch is provided, but if you do want a coffee or something before you head over to the Fritz House, you can run over to Shapey and grab something at Starbucks. While we're here in this building, there's the restrooms are kind of funny. The girls' restroom is right out this door to the left downstairs, but if you are a guy, you're going to have to go upstairs to the bathroom. So just know that. And then just a quick couple of thank yous. Today has been made possible by the Brandis Fund here at Texas Lutheran University. They have helped us out in this endeavor. And then also the Southwestern Texas Synod is helping us with lunch today. So we want to make sure we thank both of those groups for the funding. So this could be free for you, and all you have to pay is your gas. So, yep.
Some of the students might be leaving at 10:20 so they can get to their class.
I think they should.
It's not anything against what you're saying, but you're free to do that.
Right. So without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker. A couple of years ago, just before the last ELCA gathering, it was decided to add a new day to the ELCA gathering called Practice Discipleship. And along with that initiative came some really wonderful training opportunities. The leaders that agreed to take on that job said, well, we'll do this, but we want to do this with the deal that we provide training for leaders in preparation for the gathering and then maybe beyond that. And it went so well last year that we've entered into a second phase of that. So this is partly the second phase of our Practice Discipleship Initiative in the ELCA, which is linked with youth ministry, the ELCA Youth Ministry Network, and so on. So some of what you'll be hearing today is part of that initiative, and Terry has been a big part of writing curriculum for that and doing a lot of the presenting for that. So we're thankful that she was able to be here. Terry Elton is the director for the Center for First Third of Life Ministries at Lutheran Seminary, and so we're glad to have her down here. I know she's glad to be here today since it's snowing in St. Paul today. So she's very happy to be here on a beautiful Texas day. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Terry Elton, and have her come up and start our first session.
Well, even if it wasn't snowing in Minnesota, I'd be glad to be here. But it just makes it all that much sweeter. I'd love to know who's in the room. I know who some of you, if you're a student, raise your hand. I saw some of you around. So you're the bunch that will be leaving, maybe, or whatever. If you're working full-time in a church, doing something, all right? You could be the janitor, or I don't know. But you're here for some reason around youth ministry. Raise your hand. How many of you got working? Okay. How many pastors do we have with us? A few? All right, awesome, good. Well, as Heather said, I'm Terry Elton. I teach at Lutheran Seminary in St. Paul. In fact, I get to go home tomorrow and teach all weekend. So they let me out during the week when I got to come back and teach in other ways, which is why I think students, you should go to class, because I've been on the other side of this. But today I'm here being a part of this Practice Discipleship Initiative. This was a really great endeavor. I got to be a part of it in year one. And now get to be a part of it in year two. And the theme for this year is what is faith formation in a missional age? So as Heather and I were talking, we thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about some of the really core questions. And for me, what's exciting is we've got people around the whole country talking about this. I get a chance to be in, I think, 4 or 5 different synods This is the first place that I'm doing it other than working with the coaches, but in the fall I will be in Wisconsin, and I'm back in Texas, down in Houston, and I'm in Minneapolis, and I'm in one other place. So what's really fun for me is that in different locations, this conversation has different kind of feels to it. So for me, it's really fun to write curriculum, but it's even more fun to get to do it and hear conversation. So if you came to hear me talk at you all day, I'm sorry, you get to talk too, and I want to have a two-way conversation. Is that cool? So we're going to play with, and this is supposed to be faith formation, sorry about that, in a missional age. We're going to ask the question, why is this a missional age? We're going to do that this morning before our break. And then we're going to go, what is faith formation? And talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to put them together and say, all right, if this is faith formation and this is the time that we're at, what does this mean? So that's going to take us through to lunch within that, okay? Also, I will put the PowerPoints that I'm using today on my website, terryelton.com, and under presentations, and you can go to Texas Lutheran presentation, and I'll give you the date today, and you can download the PowerPoints from this morning and then the one on leading change this afternoon, okay? So with that, let's open with prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for today. We thank you for what it means to be called to lead in your church in all the various ways that we've been called to do that. And Lord, it's a changing time, and there are challenges, some that are opportunities and some that can be overwhelming. We just ask that you would be with us in our conversations as we ask some deep questions about what it means to lead in this time, your people. All this we pray in your name. Amen. All right, first out of the blocks. I've talked for a minute and a half. No. I want you to think of who you are, okay? And I want you to think of 4 symbols, and if you have paper or if you have a computer, you can write them down, or you can just remember them, all right? You don't have to turn them in or share them, but I want you to think of 4 symbols, words, ideas, whatever, that would represent who you are. Way back in time, you know, we had different ways of kind of holding our identity. They used to have shields, you know. When I was younger, we used to have to do these value shields, you know, and you had to put kind of things like that. Well, if you were to kind of figure out this, what would it be? So I'm going to give you about a minute to think about that, write it down, go. And you're going to get to share it with somebody, so if you need help remembering. All right, find somebody you don't know in this room, tell them your name, introduce yourself, and then tell them your 4 symbols. Go. All right, I'm going to pause you for just a second, and I'm going to ask you to say not only, if you haven't finished saying what they are, but say, have these changed over your life? And if so, how? Okay, go. right, let's hear just popcorn. What are some of the symbols that have used? You don't have to share all of them, but just share one or two of them. I used to work for a long time with junior high kids, so you'll be better trained than they are, I'm positive. So don't have to be orderly. Equipper.
Family member photo thing.
Family member.
If it's an object, it would be a photo.
Got it. A photo of your family. Got it. Okay. A person. What else? What? A textbook. Yeah. Right? A bridge. I kind of like just letting that hang there. Sorry. One or two more. Coffee cup. What? A shell.
Picture of a waiter holding a drink, serving.
Cool. We're going to move on. If you want to go back, if you moved, you can. If you want to stay where you are, you can. Here's mine. I chose pictures too, like Phil. First one is, anybody know what ebelskiver is? What is, it's a Danish treat, right? It's a pancake bowl, or ball, I'm sorry, and that's it. And that's my niece and my daughter, by the way. And we got to go, in California, there's a Danish village that we got to go and have ebelskiver. Have you been there? Yeah, isn't that fun? And so, but we're Danish, so for me, part of the issue, I'm Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish. How's that for a little bit of Scandinavian heritage? But I haven't realized, I mean, I didn't really love all of that stuff. Growing up, it's like whatever. But as I've gotten older, and it was very interesting, I've actually been to Norway for some various things for work related, and it was almost a little bit eerie to years as an adult show into a country that I've really only known through my heritage, and to kind of say, wow, they really told me what this is about. Like, I can fit in here. Now, I don't speak Norwegian, but it was very interesting. So foods are one way, but there's practices and values and all kinds of things that come. So for me, my heritage is a big piece. The second is my family. That's my husband and my two daughters. One's in college, one's in high school. And they represent not only my immediate family, but my extended family is important to me, who I am. I am a better human being if I've been physically active on multiple ends. It's not only my stress relief, but it's just a way for me to kind of be out in the world and do something totally different. So I have communities of people that I do races with and stuff like that that have no clue what I do the rest of my life. So that's a big part of me. And then my faith. That's actually a picture, not from Minnesota, but from Fairbanks, Alaska, where I got to be. And for me, the church, it's faith, it's community, there's a whole variety of things that come with what's being church. Those would be mine. Here's what I want to think of. I want you to think about. Today, at the heart of what this session and this morning is about is around identity. Who are you? And what are the things that inform who you are? Some parts of our identity stay the same, right? Some parts ebb and flow over time. Some of us with longer history on this earth have said there's different chapters of my life that these things would be different, right? But I bet even all of us have had things ebb and flow over our time here, all right? But I wonder, what is it that, around identity, on who you are, and how do we, even more importantly, think about how do we help foster Christian identity for people that are trying to live a Christian way of life here in this complicated world that we live in. So the overarching thing is for me around identity. Now, we're going to look at this question of how we help people live a Christian identity from 3 different angles. Oh, there's my identity. So, we're going to look at the church today. I'm going to start with some research and some trends of what I see of going on and why I think this is a missional time. Then we're going to look at faith and what faith formation is, and then we're going to look at what is it mean to form faith in that context? So, why is this a missional age? If someone was to come up to you, now here's my thing. I live in a seminary and these things get thrown around all the time, but we're not normal people, all right? Which is good, why it's good to get out of there every now and then, you know? But part of the thing for me is our time has changed. And some of us grew up in congregations and where church was important and whatever, and some people did not, right? And as we're called to help people live a Christian way of life, we've got people coming at this endeavor from all kinds of different places. So if I was to ask you, why do you think this time that we live in, the 21st century, is a missional age? What would your answer be? What would you think? I was waiting for somebody to ask that. I thought, what would you guys say? Thank you for asking it, by the way. What things come to mind? Outward, an outward focused thing. Yep. What else? Yeah. Yeah. About what is it? What would it mean to go out and share the faith, right? And why would that be needed today? I mean, you think of missionary, right? Maybe people we've sent. There's so many unchurched, right? Yeah. And or people that say, yeah, I go to church, but it doesn't really mean anything, right? Or it's kind of empty as far as their lives. So why would this be a time when we as Christians need to go out, right? To face the world and wonder, what does it mean to live faith in this particular time? You know, missionaries would go to different communities and figure out what's going on there and then try and have a conversation, right? So it's not just saying, you got to do what I do, but it's more of that. So why might this be that kind of a time? By the way, great definitions, okay? Yeah.
I don't know, when I first, I guess, heard that question, I kind of thought of, well, all of our basic necessities, especially for most of us, are met. And so now it's kind of a time where we don't really need to focus on ourselves as much as helping people. And so when I think of mission, I think of more going and helping those who need it. So it's a missional age because the majority of the world is able to at least have their basic needs. We have enough resources and technology and everything to go out and help. It's just not.
So this call to be attentive to those that don't have what they need, and the call for us to be attentive to that by going and figuring out that. Yep, very true. What else? And I also say, and we live in a time when we can go, right? That's accessible. So.
Because we don't know what we're doing, so we need the people outside of our communities to help teach us how to live in this time.
For sure. There's a dialogue going on, isn't there? It's not a one-way. I mean, part of the things that we learned from missionaries that would go into different communities was they first stopped to learn what was going on and to learn from, right? So it's not a one-way conversation. It's a two-way conversation. What else? Yeah.
I would say the church is becoming less and less the center of the community.
For sure.
Like the building.
Correct. Yeah, and we have to rethink, we church people have to rethink what does that mean if that's been our norm, right? Now, not everybody is there, but many people live with that as the norm. And in my neck of the woods, there are still places that lives in small town in the Midwest. There are still places where the church has a place in the community. But that is odd. It's not how it is in my community, you know, but it is, and sometimes we have to let people know that's not how the rest of the world functions, right? Yeah.
I kind of was thinking, a friend of mine here in town adopted some children from Ethiopia, and they were looking at tabloids, and like they were at the grocery store, there's some tabloids, and her son said to her, teenage Ethiopian son said, "Mom, it seems to me like the United States needs missionaries, not Africa." And I think some of that has to do with values, and that just our values and our priorities have shifted so much. And I don't know, the missional age kind of makes me think about that story she told me about him saying that.
It's right on. And partly why I'm laughing is we have a number of Ethiopian students at our seminary that would probably say the same thing, only from a different location, but love it that it came from a young person, right?
14 maybe. This conversation kind of like.
Oh, by the way, I want to say the Ethiopian church is one of the fastest growing churches. And for the Lutherans, it is way up there. So that's part of the irony.
This conversation kind of makes me wonder about redefining the word church or
Yes.
faith. Because I know, especially for me and the friends that I associate with on my age level, more of it's not the building or it's not necessarily the community. It's more of
Exactly.
yourself and your relationship that we really focus on.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference than my mom, where she goes every single day or goes every single Sunday.
Yep.
And the building has more, not
Yeah.
more meaning than her own,
No.
but that is symbolic, whereas
Yeah.
for me it's kind of private and I don't necessarily share as much.
Well, and there's a more organic nature and relational nature, right? Versus a building and programs and certain ideas that have to be there, right? For it to be church.
And I think that kind of hits on what she was saying about the values and stuff. And
Right.
what media has portrayed of
Right.
the building and the people that associate with that building.
Right. Well, you guys are right on, I think. And what I want to do is highlight one of the jobs that I get to do is I get to sit back and look at the bigger picture on some things. And so as I've looked at research and as I've on a variety of different levels, not only with young people, but also around church in general, there's some things I want to share about you on why I think this is a missional age. And in some ways, my sense is that this is just going to affirm the gut or the experiences you've already had. I don't think any of this maybe in this room might be new news for you, but I think it helps bridge a conversation when we have people that see it differently and you don't know how to put it together, how to do that. So here we go. The world is changing. I don't have to tell you that, but it is. And I think it's part of our job to be attentive to that as people of faith. Your example is a prime one, is if we think the church is like it was at whatever time in our lives and it gets frozen, we're in trouble because the church continues to change, our communities continue to change. And so part of our job as being God's people located in the world is to be attentive to the changes that are going on around us. I'll give you a really prime example. In my part, I live south. I live just south of the Mall of America and the airport, whichever is a better point of reference, and in a suburb, okay, kind of at the edge of the greater Twin Cities area. And people like to say there's not poverty there. And if you look at the statistics, one could say there isn't. There's 6% poverty. Well, that's below the state average, which is 11, and below the national, which is 13. There's no poverty. Well, you look a little bit deeper in that, and our church, partly how I know this is our church has had all kinds of people showing up at the door over the past probably 8 years. This growing number of people coming and asking for food. So yeah, here's the statistics, but here's real people showing up at our church. So they've started to ask questions and talk to people in the community and talk with community nurses and health organizations and found out that a lot of the food shelves and stuff in the community have closed for funding, lack of funding, all kinds of things. And so slowly over time, they've gathered this. We reorganized our church, and so our old youth area is now this gigantic food distribution area kind of thing. It's a room probably twice this size to give you a sense of what went from a closet now. So we know there's need, but here's what I found out. So I'm weird, I look at data. And so I found out, yep, we're below that, but you know what? For households with children under 18, it's 11%. Under 5, it's 18%. Okay? For single mothers with children under 18, it's 21%. With single mothers with children under 5, it's 33%. Who are the people that are in the poverty level? Families, you know, single parent families, children. It's not these, and so there's an example of if we're paying attention to what's around us, there might be opportunities that are saying, what does it mean to be God's people here? Well, when they come knocking at your door asking for food, it may be the opportunity to learn more. So there's all kinds of levels of saying, what does it mean? But that's one really concrete example. Here, this is to your point about the whole landscape changing. Once known as a Christian nation, today the United States is a melting pot of all kinds of religious expressions, okay? 2012 marks the first time in American history where the number of people who identify as Protestant has dropped below 50%. And there's no hint that that's going back up, by the way. Now, clearly, different regions of the country have different makeups, but this is nationally, okay? Most states, and I can give you the link to this if you would like to know this, was fascinating to me, but most states, 45 out of 52, fall somewhere between 30 and 55% of their population that claim to be Christian, okay? That's the majority of our, of the United States. Which is, it's, yeah.
Guam and Puerto Rico.
Thank you.
Yep. So, this fact means that Christianity is no longer the majority religion. But here's the deal. Nothing's replaced it. So it's not like there's a majority religion and then everything else. It's now, there are smaller pockets of multiple kind of religions existing alongside one another, okay? The church once nurtured faith within a society that supported it. Or at least complemented its values and the Christian rhythm of life. I grew up for a period of time in Fargo, North Dakota. My dad was a pastor. We came home from church, stores weren't open, restaurants weren't open. We hung out at home. It was boring. But I lived in a time, now that's not true in Fargo, North Dakota today. But a lot of things still aren't open. It's just very interesting, right? But it provided room for Sabbath in that community. That's not the case anymore. That's just one example. When I started doing youth ministry 25, 30 years ago, the conversation was fighting over church and school having programming on Wednesday, or not giving as much homework, or having games, and all of those kind of things. I know it still exists, those conversations still exist in some places. That conversation, we didn't change anything. School won, or church lost, or it changed, whatever, however you want to go. That said, no, this is just the new world we live in, right? So there's a variety of things that in the rhythm of life, whether it didn't say you had to go to church, but it allowed different space for us that were kind of having these rhythms of a Christian life or practices to kind of come forth. And those just aren't what it looks like anymore. In the National Study of Youth and Religion, which is, Christian Smith was the prime person. It's a longevity study, and so this is its first phase, but they're following folks. Now they have young adult information out, and now they're kind of keeping with them into their later young adults. But as they surveyed 13 to 18-year-olds, this is what they said. Basically, a third, and a third. 2/3 of young people that they surveyed across the United States said they were loosely or actively connected to a faith community. This is various faiths, not just Christian, all right? 1/3 said they weren't. 2/3, okay? Of that here's the thing that's even more interesting. 92% said they believed in God, or that you know, they'd be of a conversation that God exists and varying levels, all right? So only 8% said no God, of that 1/3 that's not connected, all right? But on the same note, only 8% on this end, so remember 1/3 were active in a congregation. Some of you see these people. But only 8% of that 1/3 actually said faith mattered in how they made decisions in their life. All right, pause. As a person that teaches children, youth, and family ministry, as a person that's done it in a congregation, as a person that is the parent of high school and college students, this troubles me. Because 2/3 of 13 to 18-year-olds are loosely or actively connected to a congregation. And only 8% actually have it matter in their life. So part of our going out might be to go to the exact names we have on our rolls. The people, I mean, this isn't going really far. This is asking deep questions of saying, how does faith really matter? Here's the thing for me. I spoke in chapel yesterday for those of you that weren't here, and I announced that I think the church is broken. Here's why I think the church is broken. How is it that people are showing up or connected to our faith communities and faith still doesn't matter? That troubles me. And here's what we found. This is a whole nother kind of thing. But these 13 to 18-year-olds very much reflect what their parents think. So, if this is what's going on with the 13 to 18-year-olds, this might be what's going on in their families as well, right? So I want to change that. How's that? That's my mission. Here's another thing that's important that we found out of another study called, actually we found it out of the National Study of Lutheran Religion, but we also used it in the Exemplary Youth Ministry Study as one of the key things. Congregations matter. Living communities with real people that know their name, that practice these things, are the single most important factor in faith making a difference in their life. Now, we're going to find out in a little bit, we're in trouble because congregations are in trouble. But for faith in young people to be part of this 8%, they matter. And those of you that want that, on the more details on what those are, we're not going to have that here, but I can give you links to what those particulars are around faith for children, youth, and family stuff. But congregations matter, folks. We have a calling to this. All right, with that, 3 themes for current research, all right, that are going on as we look. Now I'm going to step out of the children, youth, and family hat and just say what's going on in the church, all right? Number 1, if we look denominationally, all right, doesn't matter what denomination that is, all major religious groups are experiencing decline. Pick one, and it's just what's the rate, all right? So, you don't have to know all these numbers. There's no test on all this, but here's some samples. Well, first of all, 2009, March 2009, in the USA Today, you know, one of those really religious papers, but a new study had come out, and they highlighted it, and they said almost all denominations are losing ground, this survey finds. And here's what they said. Faith is shifting, drifting, or outright vanishing. That was 3 years ago in the USA Today. So there are a few exceptions. So I want to note those. There are 4 listed up there that are growing more than 135,000, okay? This is over a 10-year period, all right, that they're experiencing increase. Assemblies of God has increased. Latter-day Saints have increased. The Muslims have increased. Now they're estimating this because this is newer in the in the world of gathering data there. And the Seventh-day Adventists are on that. And by the way, the percentage here is their growth, the number of people is there, and then the number of congregations or faith communities. And for me, those all give a little different picture of it, so that's what that means. But here, most that we would maybe be aware of are experiencing decline. ELCA, my tribe, down 18%, down 900,000 people, down almost 900 congregations. Now, Minnesota and Texas don't need to be told this if you're ELCA. We know it. We know it firsthand. We know who they are. We have names, we have faces, etc. We're two of the top states hit, actually, as we look at the ELCA. Other places would go, I don't see much difference, parts of the country, but we are. But that's where we fall. UCC, well, they're down 24%, right?
How long was the time period?
10 years.
10 years.
Yep. Presbyterians, Episcopals, American Baptists, Missouri Synod. Now look at Roman Catholic. Now they're only down 5%, but look at the number of people and look at how many parishes. I bet that has impact here in Texas. If we look at the religious landscape on who are our neighbors. So I just pulled out some samples of that. The bottom line is this is just depressing for any of us that are churchgoers. I don't want that. I don't want to be the losers. I don't want to be, it'd be one thing if we're the only losers. I don't know if it's more comforting to know we're all losers in this, So that's the first thing, is denominationally, there's just a decline, and it's just the difference is the rate, all right? So religiously, all right, let's go up. Well, what about faith and people's belief in God? Well, being church has declined. Well, that makes sense if all these things are declining. But here, in 2000, 50% of the population reported a religious affiliation. In 2010, that dropped to 48.8%. So as a whole, the United States is becoming a lot less religious.
Can you go back to that slide?
You sure can. Yep. And I don't know. This curriculum is available. The ELC is giving it away. It'll be all public at the end of the practice discipleship thing, but the links to all this is in this curriculum, and I will work with your synod to see, because some of this is just, if it's helpful for you to follow these things, it's all in the curriculum, so I'll get it to you. I just don't know. I don't think I can put that on my website, is my point, because they need to roll it out. But anyway.
I think this summer is when it'll be available on the ELCA website, the
So.
ELCA Youth Ministry Network website.
So, but I can get you this curriculum that has the links if that'd be helpful, so just let me know. All right, one of the big things, and you probably heard about this, is the nuns. What this picture doesn't say is, it's people self-reporting, I'm affiliated with some group, right? But it doesn't tell you much about what they believe or don't believe. So, we've got this stuff on who are the nuns. Being a nun is one with no religious affiliation based on checking a box of your census stuff, right? Or in a survey. But on the contrary, just like with this group of children, youth, and family people, we have people in different variations in this world of the nuns that actually believe in God and have Christian practices and that kind of stuff. But they're doing it on different terms, all right? So many of the nuns say they believe in God and describe themselves, self-described, as religious, spiritual, or both. What would be the difference between religious and spiritual? Religious would be, connected to the institution of church, a particular brand of Christianity, for example, Presbyterian or Episcopalian or Lutheran or whatever. Spirituality would be, I believe in God. It might be the more personal kind of connection, and more loosely defined, right? So those would be the difference. And while many nuns believe in God, they're not interested in organized religion as we know it. And I think, tell me your name. Kim, I think you said it very well. The relational side, a more organic side, a more, I'm trying to figure this out for myself side, not worrying about what denominations are worried about. That's it. There's shifts taking place between saying, that's a church business issue, I don't care about that. This is what I care about. And these are the things that I'm trying to struggle with. And I think part of this shift, as we talk about in organized religion and affiliation, is the shift of people trying to recalibrate, how do I claim to be Christian and be in that conversation? That whole landscape is changing. So I would say it's time for congregations and/or denominations or the organized church to rethink what it means to journey with people both currently participating in congregations, as well as these people that say, I believe in God, yet I don't know what kind of connections I need to a congregation. How will that help me? How will you join me in this? And I don't think this is about consumerism as much as it is, you know what, I got limited time, space, and reality. And if this isn't meaningful, I'm going to go find something, a meaningful place to engage the questions. Yes, there's some consumerism in it. But if we look at the baby boomers, that was more like, I'm looking for my brand of Christianity. So change your worship style or something like that. This is more, you're not even asking the questions that I'm asking. So I don't really care what kind of music we listen to. Does that make sense? Okay. So here's the thing, and this will make sense to what I just said. 1/5 of the United States in general is religiously unaffiliated, the highest percentage in their polling. But for adults under 30, it's 1/3. This is not equally among all age groups. This is really the emerging young adult kind of population that find themselves there. All right, theme 3. Congregations are less healthy, and they're self-reporting less healthy. It's not by markers other people have set and they're saying they're unhealthy. So what do we find out? Again, same time period, 2000 to 2010, in a decade of change in America. And this is a great report, by the way, if you're interested in going. And I can give you the website to find it. The past decade brought this, an increase in innovation and adaptive worship. Some of us want to go, well, it's about time, right? That have been trying to do it for decades. But I think that's really good news. A surprisingly adaptive rate on technology, on electronic technology, all right? A dramatic increase in racial ethnic congregations and many from immigrant groups. Again, good, because this is what's happening in our world, right? And a general increase in the breadth of both member-oriented and mission-oriented programs. All right, that's the good news. But it also saw a steep drop in financial health. Does this surprise anybody? I didn't need to tell you that, did I? All right. Continuing high levels of conflict. And on all fronts. Anybody ever lived through a time of financial stress in your life? Were there times when conflict came out of that? Like you're more agitated or you're more apt to be. I mean, some of these make sense when you put them together, right? Here's the other thing, aging membership. Okay, again, that's not a surprise, right? But what was the net results then? Fewer people in the pews and decreased spiritual vitality. Okay, I'm coming to church and I'm doing this thing, but I'm not really leaving feeling like God entered into my life today. I feel like I just, you know, we talked about the budget again, or about the losses. In my congregation, I live in Lutheran Mecca. You can trip over Lutheran churches. Large, small, traditional, not traditional, whatever. On the other side of the ELCA vote, one of the congregations, very large, I'm in a large congregation. There's many large congregations around us. And one of the other large congregations a few years before had left the ELCA, made sense with where they were going and whatever. But when the vote came in the ELCA a few years ago, literally our back door swung open and all these people went 2 miles from my house to this other church. And I sat, and when people come, we welcome them and we do a new member Sunday or we do these things. When people leave, they're just not there anymore. And for a while, people weren't sure if they were going to come or going. And it was literally a year and a half of just sadness. Because you weren't really sure who was here, who wasn't, where people were at. But it was this kind of leaving. And you looked around, and not only were there less people, but suddenly I found out some of the people, because we have multiple services, so it takes a while to figure out, are they at the different service, or are they, you know, whatever. And they go, no, we're no longer doing this, and we're whatever. And I'm like, my age group isn't here anymore. You know? People that I have since, I mean, my kids were both baptized at our church and whatever, and so families that I've traveled with for 15, 18 years are suddenly not around. It's depressing for a long period of time to show up at church. And that had nothing to do with the sermon. Are you see my point here? Is that the church was still doing its stuff and trying to, at the same time, it was just hard to be part of that community, watching it kind of fall apart and not really knowing what to do. So that's my little story, but I think there are lots of those stories that are existing for various reasons, all right? But overall, we're not as healthy. And for me, I care about the finances. I think we can deal with conflict resolution, but this one really concerns me. How do we be a place of spiritual vitality again? I hope we can get our budget set too, you know? But I've been spiritually vital when my checkbook wasn't balanced. You know what I mean? Like, those are two different things. So, what does this mean, these three themes? I want to say to you and to all the other church people trying to do this work, this is just darn hard right now. We are living through a time that is seeing shifts on every front. And this hard stuff is not your fault. It has been going on for decades. It has been, you know, coming. And the other thing is, you're not alone. Sometimes when stuff happens to us, we can think we're the only one. And there's something helpful to know, whether it's grief or loss or, you know, whatever, that we're not the only one, okay? This is a larger thing going on. This is not an ELCA issue. This is not a state of Texas issue. This is not a whatever issue. This is something that's shifting our whole landscape. Second, if we're going to turn any tides, a new VBS curriculum, a new way to do Sunday school, shifting to small group confirmation, adding a worship band is not enough. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't look at those things, all right? But those are moving little things around in the midst of this bigger storm and paying no attention to it. And most often I'm talking to youth workers, I'm really excited because a few of the times this fall I get to actually talk to lead pastors and to people in the larger system, not just people in the youth ministry. But here's the thing for me. This is something that we got to ask big, gigantic, enormous questions about. What does it mean to be church? And so just doing little changes isn't enough. And third, it's time. It's time that we ask the bigger questions. And we said we can't just figure out the best confirmation curriculum and be happy with that. We have to ask the bigger questions. Go to your next class, those of you that have to go. All right? What I would like those of us, as we just wrap up here in the next couple minutes, turn to your neighbor or a couple of you and say, what if this rings true? What questions do you have? Where's this sitting with you? All right? I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. All right? And then we'll just take the last 5 minutes and hear where you're at. All right, let's hear from some of your reflections. What are some reactions, affirmations, questions, challenges, stories?
It sounds like the church is grieving, and I've never thought of it in that term, but going back to the previous chart, a pastor friend of mine was talking about how when we redefine traditions, people that held those traditions valuable experience a grief of that loss. And so we always listen to the good things about how we're being innovative and changing things, but we don't realize that we're also creating this sense of grief, loss of traditions. And so I've never thought of the church as grieving.
It's a great, and we know some things about grief, right? And so if we put it in those terms, we can say, you know, this is going to be a natural part of the progression, but this is how we move forward. You know, it's not an either or. I mean, most of us don't get to grieve because we chose to, right? I mean, it's because it happened. But we all grieve. And it's just we're at different places and all that kind of stuff. Very helpful insight.
I work with congregations involved in the call process.
Oh.
I was telling these guys, one of the two things that come up the most that they want on their ministry site profile are pastoral care to take care of the aging population and someone who is whiz at youth and families so that they can bring in all the young families that are missing. And so I think it's, on one hand, they've kind of recognized, we have an aging population and we need to bring in. On the other, they're sort of pinning all their hopes on this Lone Ranger that will come in.
And I think there's also this sense with the people that I'm working with that are saying that, and we want them to bring into church as we imagine it.
Yes.
And so church looks still like Wednesday, Sunday, VBS. I mean, you guys, I literally had a church. I had the Christian education group say, we're canceling VBS because this doesn't make sense with our aging population and all the energy and all the money. And we had the older people say, we cannot be a church without VBS. And it was this fight. But it was about what it meant to be church. Now, they found an opening to do some more, we were talking about kind of missional kind of thing. It was actually became an outreach to the community, and a variety of people had to come together to do it. So I'm not sure where they landed was all bad. But really, we can't be church without VBS? I think not. I mean, we can worship without an organ, too. Or hymnals, or, you know, I mean, maybe not at TLU, but I'm just kidding. Sorry. What else? One or two more. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, somebody said to me that they're wondered aloud if the church wasn't in a period of wandering in the desert too. And it didn't make as much sense then, but it kind of does now a little bit. And I wonder if that part of what we need to be asking too is what does it look like to be faithful and to trust
For sure.
while we're wandering and to know that we'll be led, that God is leading this.
Yes.
So what does that look like, and what does being faithful in that look like?
She doesn't even know this, but she's teeing me up for something later we're going to do today. But think about wandering, and think about in our biblical story, we have all kinds of time that we of God's people have wandered, right? And we've still been called to be faithful, and we've still been church, and God's still been present, right? Being wanderers or being in a time of wandering doesn't mean we're not being faithful or God's people. One of the things we can do is, we're going to talk about leading in the midst of change, is that loop back into our own story. So I'm thinking about post-resurrection, we didn't know what to do either. Doesn't mean we'd stopped. You know, it meant we had to figure it out. So part of this is this, if we look big enough at our history as a church, we've been here before. The answer is, we didn't have tweeting, you know, and those kind of things, but we've been here before, and we can be faithful still. One more. I saw a hand back up there. Yeah.
I was actually going to say, that's going to be closer to my sermon topic this Sunday, is that in John 21,
Yeah.
I'm going to go back fishing.
Yeah.
And then everything
Yeah.
just fell down around our feet.
Yep.
And I don't like this, and I really don't like that cross thing.
Yep.
And I'm just going to go fishing.
Yep.
He says, hey, I'm right here, have something to eat. You know, so,
Yep.
so you know, it's hard. It is very difficult. And
Right.
because it's hard, that's why Christ is here for us. Now, it doesn't make it any easier
Right.
necessarily at this very moment, but when we're together, it makes it a whole lot easier.
And, because I just did that same text a week ago, and you can't just keep fishing. They don't get, if they just kept fishing, we wouldn't have the rest of the New Testament. But they didn't, right? And it didn't mean they never fished again. It means Jesus said, you know, go, change, do these things, think differently, right?
To feed my sheep.
Exactly. Have a calling.
It wasn't, oh, I'm sorry that everything's going bad.
Right?
Yeah, what do you expect? Go feed my sheep.
But here's the thing for me, and that's a great transition. I think we as church people get all bogged down in all the churchy stuff, rather than what's the core that we're called to do again, which is the great transition of the church is called to nurture faith, has not changed. Feed my sheep. Go baptizing and teaching. Pick a version. We've been called and sent on a mission. The environment has, but the call has not.
Students at TLU engage in high-impact educational experiences that include civic engagement, aesthetic expression, critical thinking, and a focus on intercultural knowledge in a community that welcomes the interplay of faith and reason.